Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the next video on photosynthesis and specifically looking at electron carriers in detail. Let's go through this next video and understand what electron carriers are. So what we're going to be looking at is something similar to what we were looking at for cellular respiration. We're looking at NADPH. Well, why do we need NADPH? Well, we need it in order to power this system that we're going to learn about called the Calvin cycle. And we're going to need ATP and NADPH to do that. In order to make the light-independent reactions occur, the light reactions make the chemical energy to power this cycle, this Calvin cycle, which is eventually going to go through and make the sugar. So what we're going to look at in detail here is how these electron carriers work and how they go through and function to make these cycles function. So if we're looking at NADPH, it's an electron carrying molecule similar to NADH, don't get them confused, and it can carry high energy electrons and provide energy for chemical reactions. It's going to break down and turn into NADP+, and this is the carrier molecule when the two electrons and proton are missing. Now if we look at this, we can see that NADH and NADPH are similar, but slightly different. NADH is used in cellular respiration, and NADPH is used in photosynthesis. Now, how does an electron carrier molecule go through and work? Well, instead of going through and dumping off a phosphate or breaking that molecule apart, we have these electrons that are going to float around the nucleus of an atom. They're negatively charged, and when we charge them with sunlight, they're going to become what we call excited. They're going to jump into an outer shell. So they're going to reach a higher energy state. And as they come down from that outer shell, they're going to go through and release energy. And we can use that energy to go through and create concentration gradients to make our ATP synthase function in the case of cellular respiration. Or we can go through and use and take NADPH and turn it into NADP+ in order to make the Calvin cycle function along with ATP. So these electrons are going to be important because they're going to release energy. We can use the electron energy as they move down from their excited state to go through and get biological functions to go through and occur. Now, if we look at the key differences between NADP+ and NADPH, NADP+ is missing the hydrogen ion and it's missing 2 electrons. If I add in those hydrogen ions and those 2 electrons, I create NADPH. We can see the difference between the 2 of these here. If I take away that hydrogen ion and take away 2 electrons, I go back to NADP+. So we can see the chemical difference, and again, we're using those electrons. Instead of ATP where we break apart phosphates, we're utilizing these electrons for energy. Now, just so we're 100% clear, the main difference between ATP and NADPH is that the hydrolysis, remember we're breaking apart that phosphate, releases energy. Whereas in the case of NADPH, we are oxidizing it and it's providing those electrons. So ATP, remember it has those 3 phosphates on the back. It's stable once phosphorylized. Whereas if we look at NADPH, we have these free electrons which can destabilize molecules. So this is very, very important for us to understand. ATP is the main currency in our body because whether exists as ATP, AMP, ADP, for the most part it's stable and it's not going to destabilize other molecules. Whereas if I have NADP+ and 2 free electrons, those electrons are very, very strong and they have a strong negative charge. They can cause damage to DNA and they can cause cancers or they can denature proteins. So the reason that that's not the main currency, even though it releases a decent amount of energy, if I had that as the main currency in my body, it could cause other problems downstream. Whereas ATP is a pretty stable molecule. Now ATP in here, in this case, is going to go through and turn into ADP. This should be review. When I go through and break apart that phosphate, that's going through and releasing the energy and creating another stable molecule that I can use as currency in my body. Now if I have NADPH, the way that I go through and get energy out of it is I'm going to remove one of the hydrogens from it, and I'm also going to go through and use the electrons now for energy. So removing those electrons is what provides the energy, whereas with ATP, removing the phosphate provides the energy. And that's important for us to understand when going through and looking at the Calvin cycle and going and looking at light-dependent reactions. All right, so this is going to be the end of the video, but did you learn? Did you learn a couple of things here? Did you learn about the differences between ATP and NADPH? Did you learn about how they release energy different? And lastly, did you learn about when your body would use them and understanding the difference in why we use ATP as a main currency and NADPH for specific cases? This is going to be the end of the video. I will see you all in class tomorrow.